All right, everybody, buckle up. Today's story is about a guy who single-handedly ran the entire events operation for a conference planning company. Every speaker, every schedule, every venue relationship, every vendor contact, all of it, in his head and on his personal laptop. Then his new boss fired him because he took 10 minutes to reply to an email. 10 minutes. And on his way out the door, the boss said, "Take everything that's yours." So he did. And the company found out real fast that everything that was his was basically everything. Speakers stopped returning calls. Venues didn't recognize the new contact. 3 conferences got canceled. This is a masterpiece. Let's go. My boss fired me because I took 10 minutes to reply to an email. She said, "Take everything that's yours." So I took my laptop, my contacts, my notes, and 8 years of institutional knowledge. 3 conferences got canceled. I debated posting this for a while because some people might think I'm being petty. But honestly, I think what happened to me is a cautionary tale about what happens when a company treats one person like they're replaceable and then discovers they absolutely are not. My name's Bryce. I'm 34. For 8 years, I worked as the events operations manager for a mid-sized conference planning company. I won't name them, but they planned and executed between 15 and 20 professional conferences a year. Industry stuff, corporate retreats, annual summits, that kind of thing. Think 200 to 2,000 attendees per event, multi-day, multiple venues, dozens of speakers, and a production schedule that would make a Broadway stage manager sweat. My job was to be the connective tissue between every moving part. I managed the speaker pipeline, finding them, booking them, negotiating fees, coordinating travel, handling their egos, and trust me, speakers have egos. I managed venue relationships, which hotels, which convention centers, which caterers, which AV companies. I managed the production timeline for each event. When does setup start? When do doors open? When does the keynote begin? Where does the overflow crowd go? Who handles the mic if it cuts out during a panel? I was not the CEO. I was not the creative director. I was not the face of the company. I was the engine room, the thing that made the whole ship move. And for 8 years, that engine ran clean. Let me give you an idea of the scale we're talking about. At any given time, I was managing the moving parts for 4 to 5 upcoming conferences simultaneously. That's 4 to 5 sets of speakers, usually 10 to 15 per conference, 4 to 5 venue contracts, 4 to 5 catering agreements, 4 to 5 AV setups, and 4 to 5 timelines that all had to be perfect. Because when you're charging companies $40,000 for a booth at your conference, we're running a little behind is not an option. I kept all of this organized in a system I built myself over 8 years. It started as a spreadsheet. Then it became a series of linked spreadsheets. Then it became a full project management system built in Notion. Custom databases, automated reminders, linked contacts, event templates, the works. All on my personal laptop. All connected to my personal email and my personal Notion account. Why personal? Because when I started, the company didn't have project management software. They didn't have a CRM. They didn't have a shared drive that worked reliably. They had a filing cabinet in a closet and a receptionist named Phyllis who kept notes on Post-its. Phyllis was great. The system was not. So I built my own. Over the years, every time I asked the company to invest in proper tools, the answer was, "It's not in the budget," or "What you have seems to work fine." So my personal system became the de facto company system, except it wasn't the company's. It was mine. I want to be clear. I didn't plan this as a bargaining chip. I didn't think one day, I'll keep everything on my personal stuff so they can't fire me. It just happened organically because nobody gave me anything else to work with. I asked for a company laptop 3 times. 3 times they said no. I asked for a Notion team account. They said it was unnecessary overhead. I asked for a shared calendar system. They said, just use Google Calendar, which I did on my personal Google account, because they didn't give me a company one until year 4. By then, everything was already built on my personal infrastructure. Quick side note, around year 5, I did briefly consider migrating everything to the company's systems. Then they denied my raise request for the 3rd time, and I thought, nah, I'll keep my insurance policy where it is. Hold on. This is me, not Bryce. I need to point something out. This company ran 15 to 20 conferences a year. We're talking millions in revenue. And they wouldn't buy their operations manager a laptop. They wouldn't pay for a Notion subscription. They wouldn't give him a company email until year 4. That's like running a hospital and refusing to buy the surgeon gloves. Just use your hands, doc. We don't have the budget. And now this man's entire operational brain lives on his personal devices that the company has zero legal claim to. This isn't a vulnerability. This is a ticking time bomb. And the woman about to light the fuse doesn't even know the bomb exists. I'm calling her the email auditor, because you'll see why in a minute. Alright, so let me tell you about my boss. For the first 6 years, I reported to the company founder, a guy named Glenn, who understood the events business, understood my value, and left me alone to do my job. Glenn's management style was, Bryce handles events, I handle sales. Let's meet on Fridays to make sure nothing's on fire. Perfect system. I thrived. The company grew from 8 conferences a year to 18 under that arrangement. I remember there was a speaker, a woman who gave talks about supply chain innovation at our annual operations summit. She'd done our conference 4 years in a row. Every year I'd call her in January. We'd catch up for 20 minutes about her family. 2 kids, a dog named Biscuit, husband who runs a small accounting firm, and then we'd book the date. She trusted me. She didn't even ask for a contract anymore, just a handshake over the phone. That's the kind of relationship that takes years to build and seconds to destroy. I had maybe 50 of those relationships. 50 people who would pick up the phone when I called because they knew it was me. Not the company. Me. Glenn knew this. Glenn was smart about it. He once told me at a company dinner, Random Tuesday, the Italian place on 5th, Bryce, the company is the brand, but you're the reputation. Don't let anyone confuse those two. I should have had that tattooed on my forearm. Then Glenn semi-retired. Brought in a new CEO, a woman I'll call Renee. Renee came from corporate consulting. She had never planned an event in her life. She had never worked in the events industry. She had an MBA and a belief that every organization needed to be optimized using the framework she'd learned in business school. She used words like streamline and scalable in every meeting. She had a whiteboard in her office covered in arrows and boxes that I think was supposed to be an org chart but looked more like a conspiracy theory about how the post office works. She also had a sign on her desk that said, data-driven in gold letters. I never saw her look at data, not once. Within her first month, she implemented daily stand-ups for a team of 11 people, required weekly written status reports that nobody read, and introduced a response time policy. All internal emails had to be responded to within 5 minutes during business hours. 5 minutes. For a guy who was simultaneously negotiating a speaker fee on the phone, texting a venue contact about a room change, and reviewing a catering contract with the finance team. 5 minutes. Renee announced this policy in an all-hands meeting, and when I raised my hand and said, 5 minutes seems tight for the events team given the nature of our work, she said, if you can't manage your email responsiveness, that tells me something about your time management. I should have known right then. The other people in the room looked at me like I'd just spoken out of turn at church. Nobody else pushed back. Phyllis, who was sitting in the back, caught my eye and made a face that basically said, this woman is going to be a problem. Phyllis had good instincts about people. She also had good instincts about weather and which restaurants to avoid. I miss Phyllis. The 5-minute email policy became a running joke among the team, but only behind Renee's back. We started calling it the timer. Someone would send an email and say in Slack, timer started. It was funny for about 2 weeks, and then it became genuinely stressful. I found myself checking email compulsively, during calls, during meetings, during bathroom breaks. My phone was always in my hand. Katie noticed. She said one night, you're looking at your email more than you look at me. She was joking, but also not. Over the next several months, Renee and I clashed. Not dramatically, more like a slow-building friction. She wanted visibility into everything I did. She wanted to be CC'd on every speaker email. She wanted to approve venue contracts that I'd been signing independently for 6 years. She wanted me to document every process in a company-accessible format, which, fair enough, is a reasonable ask. But when I asked for the tools to do it, a company laptop, a shared project management system, a budget for migration, she said, use what we have. What we had was a filing cabinet and Phyllis's Post-its. There was one specific incident that I think defined our relationship. About 4 months into Renee's tenure, we had a conference in Nashville. Big one, 1,200 attendees, 22 speakers, 3-day event. I was on site managing everything. On day 2, during the lunch break between panels, one of our speakers had a panic attack backstage. Not a minor one. The guy was hyperventilating, couldn't stand up, clearly in distress. I spent 40 minutes with him in a back hallway, helping him calm down, getting him water, and eventually arranging for one of the other speakers to extend their session to cover his slot. I handled it. The audience never knew. The schedule barely rippled. While I was doing this, Renee sent me 7 emails about the font size on the sponsor slideshow. 7. I responded to all of them after the situation was handled, about an hour later. She called me that evening and said, "Bryce, your email responsiveness today was unacceptable." I said, "I was managing a speaker crisis." She said, "That's not an excuse. Delegate the crisis. Prioritize communication." Delegate the crisis. To whom? The catering manager? The AV intern? I was the only operations person on site. There was nobody to delegate to. But Renee didn't understand that because Renee had never run an event. She'd read about running events in a case study once. That's not the same thing. After Nashville, I started keeping a file. Not for revenge, for protection. Every email, every unreasonable request, every denied resource request, every response time I was criticized for while doing actual work. Dated and organized, just in case. My buddy Pete, the lawyer, had told me years ago, "Always keep receipts. You never know when the receipts become the story." The actual breaking point came on a Wednesday. I was on a call with a keynote speaker for our biggest annual conference, a guy who charges 25 grand per appearance and was doing us a favor at 15 because I'd booked him 3 years running and we had a relationship. Mid-call, Renee sent me an email asking for an updated attendee count for a different conference. I saw the notification. I was on the phone. I finished the call. It took about 10 minutes, and then replied to her email with the numbers she asked for. 12 minutes. That's how long it took me to reply. 2 hours later, I was called into Renee's office. HR was there. A woman named Gail who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Renee told me that my pattern of unresponsiveness was not aligned with the company's communication standards, and that she was terminating my employment effective immediately. She cited 3 instances of delayed email responses, the 12-minute one that day, an 8-minute one from the previous week, I was in the restroom, and a 15-minute one from a month ago. I was at lunch, eating a sandwich, like a person. I sat there and processed it. 8 years, 15 to 20 conferences a year, hundreds of speakers, thousands of operational decisions, 12 minutes. Pause. For the listeners, this is me. Let me get this straight. Bryce was on the phone with a $25,000 keynote speaker negotiating a discounted rate for the company. And Renee fired him because he didn't answer her email fast enough while he was actively making the company money. That's like firing a firefighter for not answering a text while he's putting out a fire. The email auditor just terminated the only person who knows how to run her company's core business because of a 12-minute email gap. This woman has a PhD in self-destruction, and she doesn't even know it. The countdown has started. 3, 2, so here's where it gets good. Gail from HR started going through the exit paperwork. Standard stuff, return your badge, sign here, here's your final paycheck info, blah, blah, blah. And then Renee leaned forward and said, "And I will remember this forever. Take everything that's yours." She meant my coffee mug, my jacket, my phone charger. She was being dismissive, a little power move. Take your stuff and get out. But here's the thing. Everything was mine. My laptop, personal. My Notion system with 8 years of event data, personal account. My Google Calendar with every conference timeline for the next 18 months, personal account. My contacts list with over 300 speaker relationships, venue managers, caterers, AV techs, and vendor reps, personal phone, personal email. My project templates, my production checklists, my emergency protocols, my backup vendor lists, all on my Notion, all on my laptop, all tied to my personal accounts. I looked at Renee. I looked at Gail. The room was quiet. Renee had this expression like she'd just won something. Like firing me was the conclusion of a project she'd been working on. A deliverable. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Because in that moment I realized something she didn't. She thought she was removing a person from a role. What she was actually doing was removing the role from the company. There was no version of this job without me, because I hadn't just done the job. I'd invented the job. Every system, every relationship, every process existed because I'd created it from nothing over 8 years. And all of it was mine. I said, okay. I packed my bag. Laptop went in, phone went in, charger went in, coffee mug went in. I walked out of that building carrying 8 years of institutional knowledge in a backpack. And I didn't look back. Yo, I am shaking right now. Take everything that's yours. Take everything that's yours. This woman just told a man to take the entire operational infrastructure of her company and walk out the door with it. She handed him the keys to the kingdom and said, "These are yours, right? Take them." This is the corporate equivalent of telling someone to steal your car because you forgot it was your car they'd been driving. Renee thought she was firing a replaceable employee. She just deported her entire events department, in a backpack, through the front door, while HR watched. I can't. I literally can't. What happens next is going to be catastrophic, and I'm here for every second of it. Gail walked me to the door. In the hallway, away from Renee, she said quietly, "Bryce, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I pushed back on this." I told her I appreciated that. She said, "The 5-minute policy is absurd. I've told her 3 times. I said, "Maybe she'll reply to your emails about it within 5 minutes." Gail almost smiled. Almost. I walked to my car in the parking lot. It was a Wednesday afternoon, about 2:30. The sun was out. Birds were doing bird stuff. Normal day for the rest of the world. For me, 8 years just ended in a 15-minute meeting over a 12-minute email. I went home. I made a sandwich, turkey, mustard, lettuce on that sourdough from the bakery on Market Street. I sat on my couch and ate it in silence. My wife, Katie, came home from work, and I told her what happened. She was furious on my behalf, but I was weirdly calm. I think part of me had been expecting this since Renee showed up with her 5-minute email policy. Some things are inevitable. You just have to let them arrive. I spent the next 2 days updating my resume and reaching out to contacts. The events industry is smaller than you'd think. People talk. Within 48 hours, I had 3 interview requests. One was from a competitor who'd been trying to hire me for 2 years. Another was from a corporate events team at a Fortune 500 company. The third was from Glenn, my old boss, who was starting a new venture and wanted me to run operations. I took Glenn's offer. He called me the morning after I was fired. He'd already heard through the grapevine. He said 3 words. "You ready yet?" I said, "Yeah, Glenn, I'm ready." He said, "Good, Monday, my place, I'll have coffee." That was the entire negotiation. We worked out salary and equity details later that week over breakfast at a diner near his house. He offered me 20% more than my old salary, a small equity stake in the new company, and, this is the part that almost made me emotional, full control over building the operations infrastructure from scratch. Company laptop, company software, company accounts, proper budget. He said, "Build it right this time. Build it so the company owns it." Because I never want to be in a position where one person walking out the door takes everything with them. I appreciated the honesty. He wasn't blaming me. He was acknowledging the mistake. Now let me tell you what happened at my old company. Day 1 after I left, Renee assigned my workload to 2 junior coordinators who had been at the company for a combined total of 14 months. She told them to pick up where Bryce left off. They opened the company's shared drive looking for my files. There were almost none. Remember, everything was on my personal Notion. They found a few outdated spreadsheets from 2022 and a folder of signed contracts with no context notes. That was it. Day 1 continued. Renee also discovered that the company's main phone number was listed on about 30 vendor contracts as my direct extension. When vendors called, they got a voicemail saying, "You've reached Bryce at company name." Except Bryce wasn't there anymore. The voicemail sat for 4 days before anyone changed it. During those 4 days, At least 11 vendors left messages that went unreturned. 3 of them were time sensitive. One was a venue confirming a hold that expired, if not confirmed by Friday. It expired. Day 2. The junior coordinators tried to contact speakers for the upcoming October conference, the biggest one of the year, 3 weeks out. They didn't have direct numbers. They didn't have email addresses. They didn't know which speakers had been confirmed, which were tentative, and which had specific writer requirements. One speaker required a teleprompter, another required a specific brand of sparkling water backstage. I'm not kidding. Some of these people are very particular. They sent generic emails through the company's main inbox. Most went unanswered. Day 2 continued. One of the junior coordinators, a kid named Austin who was honestly trying his best, found my desk drawer and pulled out a stack of business cards I'd collected over the years. He started cold calling speakers from the cards. Most of them were outdated, people who'd changed jobs, changed numbers, or retired. The ones who did pick up asked for me. Austin had to explain repeatedly that I was no longer with the company. He told me later, we grabbed lunch about a month after everything went down, he's a good kid, that the most common response was, "Oh, well, good luck." One speaker asked, "Did Renee fire him?" Austin said he couldn't comment. The speaker said, "She did, didn't she? I could see it coming. That woman has no idea what she has. What she had." Austin also told me that Renee spent most of day 2 in her office with the door closed, making phone calls. He could hear her through the wall trying to explain to someone, he thinks it was the board, that the transition plan was in place and the operational continuity was assured. Those are the kinds of phrases people use when nothing is in place and nothing is assured. It's corporate bubble wrap. Sounds protective. Protects nothing. Day 3. The keynote speaker I'd been on the phone with when Renee fired me, the 25 grand guy doing us a favor at 15, called the company's main line and asked to speak with me. When they told him I was no longer with the company, he said, "Then I'm no longer doing the conference." Pulled out. 3 weeks before the event, $25,000, well, $15,000 hole in the lineup. Week 1. 2 more speakers pulled out after hearing I'd left. They didn't have relationships with the company. They had relationships with me. One of them, a woman named Dr. Avery Callahan, who spoke at our healthcare conferences, sent an email to Renee that I later heard about through the grapevine. It said something like, "I agreed to speak at your events because of my working relationship with Bryce. Without him, I see no reason to continue that arrangement." Renee apparently forwarded this email to Gail with the note, "Is this normal?" Gail apparently replied, "Yes." Week 2. The October conference was in serious trouble. They'd lost 3 major speakers with no replacements lined up. The venue contact, a guy named Darren who managed the convention center, called the company because nobody had confirmed the final room layout, the AV setup times, or the catering headcount. These were things I normally finalized 6 weeks before an event. Nobody had done them. Darren told the junior coordinators he needed answers by Friday, or he'd have to reassign some of the spaces. Friday came and went. They lost the main ballroom to another event. The October conference was eventually restructured, which is a polite way of saying it was half the size of what it was supposed to be, missing 3 keynote speakers, crammed into a smaller venue space, and attended by about 60% of the expected audience. Several major sponsors asked for partial refunds. 2 of them pulled their sponsorship for future events entirely. Look, I don't want to dance on anyone's grave here, but actually, you know what? Yes, I do. The email auditor fired a man for replying to an email 12 minutes late, and then watched her company lose multiple conferences, keynote speakers, and sponsor relationships in the span of 2 weeks. She optimized the company right into a dumpster. This is like a restaurant firing the head chef because he took too long to answer a Yelp review, and then being shocked when nobody can cook the food. Dr. Avery Callahan's email, "I see no reason to continue that arrangement. That's corporate for 'you played yourself.'" And Gail's response, "Is this normal?" "Yes. That's HR for 'I tried to warn you.'" Beautiful. Every word of it. I want to mention one more thing about the October conference because it's important for understanding the full scope of the damage. The event had 32 registered sponsors. Each sponsor paid between $5,000 and $40,000 for booth space, branding, and speaking slots. The total sponsor revenue for that conference was supposed to be around $450,000. After the restructuring, the lost speakers, the smaller venue, the reduced attendance, The company had to issue partial refunds to 11 sponsors, totaling just under $100,000. That's 100 grand in refunds because of a 12-minute email. I want Renee to sit with that math. I really do. 2 more conferences were canceled over the following months. The company went from 18 events a year to maybe 10, and the ones they kept were smaller, less prestigious, and less profitable. One of their longest-running conferences, a financial services summit they'd done for 9 years, was picked up by a competitor after the venue host told the competitor's team, "The old company's been unreliable since their events guy left. You guys should take the slot." That venue host was Darren, the one who lost the ballroom because nobody confirmed the room layout. Darren remembered. Darren always remembers. I heard from a former colleague, not Phyllis, she'd retired by then, that internal morale cratered after I left. Not because I was so beloved. I mean, I hope I was, but that's not the point. It cratered because everyone saw what happened to me and thought, if they'll fire the guy who runs everything over an email, what will they do to me? 2 more people quit in the 3 months after I left. One of them was the finance coordinator who'd been there almost as long as me. She told me over coffee, "I saw what they did to you and I thought, if Bryce isn't safe, nobody is." She works at a nonprofit now. She seems happy. Sponsors were pulling out. Speakers weren't returning calls. Venue contacts were demanding upfront deposits that they'd never required before because the trust relationship was gone. It turns out that trust wasn't with the company. It was with me. Renee lasted about 7 months after I left. She transitioned to a new opportunity, which in corporate speak means she was asked to leave. Glenn told me she'd burned through 2 operations managers in that time, neither of whom lasted more than 3 months. One of them, this is my favorite detail, quit on her second day after discovering there was no operations documentation, no contact database, and no project management system. She walked into Renee's office and said, "I can't manage operations that don't exist on paper," and left. Glenn also told me something that confirmed what I'd suspected. After I left, the company tried to claim that my Notion data and contacts were company property because they'd been created in the course of employment. They had their lawyer send me a letter. My lawyer, a buddy from college named Pete who does employment law, sent back a response that basically said, the laptop was personal, the accounts were personal, the company was asked repeatedly to provide company tools and declined, and any attempt to compel access to personal property would be met with a countersuit for wrongful termination. They never responded. As for me, I'm 6 months into working with Glenn on his new venture. We're planning 4 conferences for next year, building it right this time, proper systems, company infrastructure, shared tools. Glenn bought me a laptop on day 1, a good one. He said, "I learned my lesson. The company should own the systems, not the person." I said, "Glenn, I've been saying that for 8 years." He said, "I know. I should have listened." Katie and I went out to celebrate my 6-month mark. She ordered pasta. I ordered a sandwich. Some things don't change. She asked me if I missed the old company. I thought about it for a second and said, "I miss Phyllis." And I do. Phyllis retired last year. She sent me a card that said, "Bryce, you were the only one who knew where anything was, including me." She included a post-it note. It was blank. I think that was the joke. I've got it on my fridge next to a photo of Katie, a magnet from Nashville, from the conference where the speaker had a panic attack, and a takeout menu from the Italian place Glenn took me to. My fridge tells my life story better than my resume does. Final update. One last thing. Remember the keynote speaker, the 25 grand guy I was on the phone with when Renee fired me? He's doing Glenn's new conference. Same discounted rate. Because the relationship was with me. It was always with me. I also got a message from Dr. Avery Callahan last month asking if I was planning any healthcare-focused events. I said we're considering one for next spring. She said, "Count me in. No fee. Just get me the good sparkling water." I told her I'd have it chilled and waiting. Some relationships survive anything. Even a 12-minute email and a CEO who couldn't tell the difference between a response time policy and an actual business strategy. Glenn's new company is called Meridian Events. We're small right now, 5 people, but every one of them has a company laptop, a company email, and access to a shared project management system that I built in the first 2 weeks. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Knock on wood, someone could open that system and know exactly where every conference stands. That's how it should work. That's how the old companies should have worked. They just never wanted to pay for it. And look what it cost them. Would you have migrated your stuff to company systems before leaving? Or would you have done what I did? Taken everything that was yours, like they told you to? I keep thinking about whether I owed them the transfer, and every time I think about it, I remember they wouldn't buy me a laptop. So no, I don't think I owed them anything. I want to add one more thing. About 6 weeks after I left, Phyllis, who was still working part-time at that point, sent me a text. It said, "Bryce, the new operations person asked me where the Post-its are. I told her they retired when I did. She didn't get the joke." I laughed at that for a solid 5 minutes. Phyllis was the only other person in that building who understood that the company ran on relationships and systems that existed outside of any official framework. Her Post-its and my notion. That was the real organizational chart. And both of us walked out the door. Anyway, Katie says hi. She also says I should mention that Renee's LinkedIn still lists her as CEO of the company. She is definitely not the CEO anymore. The internet is a funny place. Katie also wants me to mention that we adopted a cat last month. His name is 12 Minutes. I thought that was a ridiculous name. Katie said it was perfect. She's right. She usually is. Here's the takeaway. If your company refuses to invest in proper tools and systems, they don't get to be surprised when the person who built their own walks out with them. Renee fired the engine and expected the ship to keep sailing. It didn't. It sank in slow motion while she stood on deck checking her email response times. If you're someone like Bryce, the person who holds it all together and nobody notices, know your worth. And maybe keep your Notion account personal, just in case. Drop a comment. Have you ever been the only person who knew how to do something and watched it all fall apart after you left? Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.